Professor David Weiss, speaking once again from the Institute for Dispute Resolution at New Jersey City University, and our flagship program on business and global affairs, Connecting Bridges and Borders podcast program. Today, we have a great conversation about a unique and innovative model on corporate social responsibility, but still doing business. We have Jim Costanzo, who is here today and is with his company called Charity Realty International. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, David, for having me. I greatly appreciate this.
I also should point out you're also a member of Commerce Industry Association of New Jersey. Is that correct?
That's right.
And go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I was just saying, and part of the International Steering Committee along with yourself. Are you the chair of that now?
I am the chair of the International Committee. Thanks for recognizing that. I appreciate that. And for our listeners around the world, CINJ, or the Commerce Industry Association of New Jersey, is a partner of our institute and Connecting Bridges and Borders, and is one of the most important state vehicles to promote business in New Jersey, and is run by a great board of leadership and under the executive directorship of Anthony Russo. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about you and this great corporate social responsibility model and how you got involved in this process to begin with.
Right. So I'm an engineer by schooling and training, and been in the real estate end of it, in the brokerage, sales, and consulting end of it since 1986. I worked with some of the larger and mid-sized companies throughout New Jersey, learned from some of the best with real estate. Prior to that, I was actually a laborer in a laborers union. It kept me in college being a laborer, but I did learn construction from the likes of like Murray Construction and Hart's Mountain, and the people that are really building New Jersey through the 70s and early 80s. And that's when I got interested in this type of field, right? So in 1986, I leave the engineering world and environmental world where I was an engineer, and I got into corporate real estate.
And in getting into corporate real estate, for our listeners, what exactly do you do in that job or career description?
I'm a consultant. Really a broker. I put together deals for corporations, small businesses, everything from mom and pop shops to large companies that are looking for real estate throughout New Jersey. Pretty much we're a New Jersey focused firm.
And do you find in this transactional business that there are opportunities for corporate social responsibility because you have this really interesting model you use. So I'd like to sort of hear about how this works.
Right. So for 20, I guess if I'm doing it 30, if I'm trying to do the math. So for about 25 years, I'm working for others, two firms in particular, large firms, smart firms. I learned the trade from some of the best in the industries when it comes to brokerage and real estate consulting and guiding, as far as site selection and what buildings and what zoning best fits certain companies. Personally, I've been involved with more industrial transactions than office transactions, but that's the type of business. It's investment deals, industrial deals, companies that need to expand and move on, right? So now it's almost 9 years ago, I was at a crossroads in my own personal career. I wanted to do something more. I was doing well. Maybe it was a stupid thing to do. I was doing well, but I'm like, I needed something more. And I always wanted to be a philanthropist, right? But how do you just become a philanthropist? You can donate some money here and there, but I was really contemplating, how do I make a difference? So I prayed. I went into meditation, and I connected very deeply with the universe. I connected very deeply in this meditation. And my future, I'm telling you, David, the future was like a movie. It broadcast itself to me so very clear. And the universe spoke back to me and said, give your money away as you bring it in, and create a business model that can do that. So my first, out of the gate, I said I can create a real estate. I had already had my broker's license, so I could create my own company. And I wanted to donate 20% of my revenue, everything that comes through the door, to these great charities, right? And they'd be charities that would be picked by my clients. After about a year, I realized I couldn't afford to donate 20%. It was too much. So I revised my model, and it's now from 10, because 20% on a small deal is a lot of money. 20% on a large deal, you don't feel it. So I revised my model to donate between 10 and 30%, depending on the deal size. And
Well,
that's kind of worked through it.
Well, I will tell you, Jim, given the low percentage of private marketplace CSR, what we call corporate social responsibility in the United States, is really a low number. I think our listeners would find it quite interesting to know that. So this sort of structure and the percentages that you're talking about are extremely, extremely generous and very novel.
Thank you.
It's a great, not only altruistic sort of way of doing business, but it's certainly, I can only imagine if every company in the country did something like this, the type of society that we could possibly build. Very fascinating.
Right now, I believe corporations account for about 5% of all donations nationally. It's really from individuals, through gifting and through endowments and things like that. But it's about 80%, I believe, it's through individuals.
And how much? And for our listeners, can you give a number of how much has been donated into charities through this structure that you've created?
We're approaching $200,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
It's kind of neat for someone like me, I'm not a wealthy. I don't consider myself a overly wealthy individual. I'm just a normal, real estate broker. As far as that goes.
I will tell you, I don't think you're normal. I think you're exceptional because of what you're doing. If we could extrapolate what you're doing up the food chain, the impact it could have. And let's talk about that impact for a minute. Tell us some stories about how it's been impactful in what
it's amazing. Doing. I got to say, for every dollar, by the way, that we give back, it seems it comes back tenfold to us in goodwill. Let me just start with that. And we also get promotion out of it. The papers will pick up our stories, because they're good stories. We had one of my very early deals was a company that had extreme snowfall, had a roof collapse, and people were trapped inside. It was a dire situation. Some people were hurt. Nobody was killed, but they were rescued by the Rockaway Borough Fire Department. So that became, now I moved two companies out of a building. Now imagine they need a new building. Their building's collapsed, right? So they need a new place to operate. And they were machinists. One was a Hungarian machinist, by the way. I know, which is dear to your heart. And they asked me to sponsor the Rockaway Borough Fire Department. And so what I do is give back 10% to the Rockaway Borough Fire Department, and then we pose for a picture.
Oh, that's amazing. Look at that.
Pretty neat, right?
That's fantastic. Yes,
so, the mayor gets in there and the fire chief gets in the picture, and we get a couple of these large checks. I don't do it all the time, but if it's an interesting story, and I think it's something that a paper would want to pick up and hear about, we produce a large check and get a photo.
And what were some of the feedback that, as you got that visibility, if we put on for a minute the business hat angle, but with its charity perspective, what was some of the feedback you got from colleagues and other people in your industry as far as what you're doing?
I got to tell you, it was met with skepticism first off. They didn't believe it. You know, they thought they believed in me, right? But just, how do you do this? You know, they couldn't get it early on. They really, they looked at, I'm going to tell you, the industry, and I mean my industry, the real estate industry, looked at it as a gimmick, right? A number of people use that word. How's that gimmick coming? I go, this isn't a gimmick. You know, this is my passion, you know, and it slowly evolved, and I changed others' minds. And by the way, there are wonderful philanthropists throughout this industry. They just don't have business models set up to do it. But they quietly, the real estate industry in it as a whole has wonderful, doing great stuff.
It's interesting you use this word gimmick. You know, I would sort of argue that that is a word that really is not a truism to what you're doing or what, and frankly, I think it's a mixed message, because a gimmick would denote that it's not good to contribute back to society as a business model. And
Right.
yet the reality is that we're all looking for a private marketplace to contribute back to all the benefits they get out of society as
Yeah.
part of that business model.
Oh, and another part of this that you can see, you could see it working. I could see it working early on, but what I didn't see or couldn't anticipate was the connection that it makes to your clients, because my clients offer up the charity. Now, of course, I have a veto power. Like, you know, if it's a bogus charity, we don't do. I have three basic tenets. One, it has to speak to you, so it's generally speaking to my client, and then they educate me about this new charity if it's one I don't already know about, and then very easily to speak to me if it's a good charity. Two, I don't like to see anyone getting rich on the charities, and there are so many charities that CEOs are making $800,000, $1.8 million. I just recently saw a CEO making. I'm sorry, that kind of flies in the face of the intent of being a charitable organization. I understand you have to pay to get good talent, and good talent's expensive, but I don't think anybody needs to make $1.8 million running a charity. I'm sorry. So I don't like to see any of that. And then the third hurdle that we have to jump is that the charity donates a reasonable amount to programs. And by that, I'd like to see really 90% of the money go to the programs. You see a charity donating 6% to programs, you realize it's more of a sham than a charity. You know, they might be doing some good, but 94% going to administrative costs. I'm sorry, that's not something I'd be willing to support.
Yeah, and that's a shame. And that's a problem, unfortunately, both here and abroad, where I think a portion of these legitimate platforms, names will not be said because we are unfiltered and unbiased about those types of things. We'll let our audience form their own opinions, but a lot of them, I think, start out with the right intent. But as they grow, they become themselves companies within the charity. Right. And as a result of that, you wind up with sort of that watershed moment where it's no longer a charity, but a company.
Right. And as they grow, here's a little tip for your viewers. If you see a charity on television, it's very hard for them to donate 90%. 9 cents on a dollar isn't going to make it if they're on TV, because it's just too expensive. Yeah. So your smaller charities actually do a better job at giving back.
So that's an interesting point you make. Do you think that when we look at the idea of donating to charities or to donating to university and education and sort of these corporate social responsibility action plans, do you think that it's important that the business community within the footprints of where they operate should be the ones sort of more focused in precision within the boundary lines, we'll say, of those communities and more localized charity giving versus these national footprints where you're giving this dollar amount to these large organizations? And some of them do of course, are very important, do good around the world. They do good, obviously, in the United States. But do you find that maybe this model could be very helpful within the boundaries of where businesses operate themselves.
What I find is my clients are connected to the local charities. You know, I mean, we've had people that are environmentalists, you know, so we've given to environmental causes. Land Conservancy of New Jersey, we helped protect, I don't know how many acres of Ramapo Ridge. They've gone up Ramapo Mountain Ridge. They've protected. We had one client who lost a child to cancer, childhood cancer. Very, very sad story, but they support the Valerie Fund because the Valerie Fund was there for them at that time. We have another client who has an autistic child. There's a wonderful charity out of Livingston called the Friendship Circle that's built a whole community, this little community center around helping autistic children with education and providing them little jobs within the center. It's grown. It's a Jewish-centric organization, but they accept everybody. It's just a lovely organization. In Patterson, Eva's Kitchen. It used to be Eva's Kitchen. Now it's Eva's Village. It's expanded to like 3 city blocks. They used to just feed the homeless. Well, they do that with thousands of meals a day. They're feeding the homeless. Unbelievable. Thousands of meals. But they also have a drug rehabilitation center and a halfway house for mothers and children that are in abusive situations. They've expanded. It's just from what it started at with Father Puma developed this, giving to the homeless, it's just expanded and grown to wonderful proportions. So we were very happy to donate to them. And it was worthy of a big check.
Wow.
So that was in the kitchen of Eva's kitchen.
Well, you know, I think these stories are really show the physicality of the impact it makes, not just short term, but long term within the community, and becomes part of not only giving back, but it also then drives its own economic engine, if you will, of helping support people either get back on their feet, help them when they have times of crises, like you were mentioning, that awful situation of a child that died of cancer. Because certainly within that spectrum, those that are affected are not, you know, they're not going to be focusing on their work at that moment in time, or they may not have a job to focus on.
Right.
So this is a great way of the private marketplace doing things that I think we lost perhaps touch with, where we think government's going to be there for all these little things. And it sounds like what you're doing is providing a channel for private marketplace to actually efficiently help its own communities and give a percentage back of what it's getting in return in true value. It becomes a partnership.
No, it's certainly a partnership. And the charities are always very happy to get the checks, right? I always insist on going there in person and, you know, and meeting the people and learning about, that's the fun part of my job. And I have to tell you, I think one of the reasons why it's a successful model is because it's self-motivating, right? I mean, it's what gets me up in the morning, because I look forward to that day when I can walk in there and say, hey, look what I have for you. Who are you? How do you even know about us? I mean, I've never heard of you, you know, it's
well,
really
yeah,
great.
it really does. I mean, you know, that meditation moment that you expressed in the beginning of our conversation, I think what it does is that on one side, it motivates you for the passion of doing good. And at the same time, it motivates you of why you want to do good, which is to get more productive even with the business so that
Right.
you can do more good as well. So it's a very symbiotic and selfless, not selfish business model. And I want my listeners, not just here, but across the world, to think and imagine, not to say it's utopia, but if we could increase what you're doing, Jim, to many others to drink the Kool-Aid, I think they would find that this is really value for them and their business organizations but is a partnership to the communities that they work and live and operate in as well.
It gives a good connection.
It
It
really
makes you
does.
connected to the community and also to your clients in a way I didn't anticipate. I did not anticipate that.
Tell us about that. What are some of the things that the feedback or the reaction of that unanticipation? What was the realization of that unanticipation?
Well, they look at you differently, right? Your client's not going to look at you as just a broker out to make a deal and bring in a buck so they can drive a new car, right? You're now a broker. You're someone out there who's connecting with something that's meaningful to them. Now I also have had clients who didn't want to participate, oddly, right? I've had clients
Wow.
who did not want to participate. They go, this is something I want nothing to do with. I am not hiring you because you are good. And by the way, no one works with me because I donate 10% of what comes in the door to their charity. They work with you because they think, because this is an important move. Are you going to expand your business into the right location? It could ruin if it's the wrong spot or the zoning is bad and you get kicked out of a building. You know, that's what's important, right? Make sure that you get the job done right, right? Really, that's what's important in the business. But with a model, it just once it happens, not early on, but once it's done, the deal is wrapped up, and then you meet, and I always like to get them involved. Come with me. I want them to know that you were the one that recommended them, and a lot of times they're already on the board or they're involved in this charity already, and well, I'm just telling you, it just makes a different connection between you and the client. They no longer perceive you as just as their broker. You're now more like a friend. Right?
So I'll use a word that sounds like, as you're talking, it sounds like magic happens in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where else have you seen this type of model implemented? Is there other organizations or businesses like yours in New Jersey that do this that you're aware of?
There's well, when I first researched the concept, I was going to be charity realty, right? I do international business, I do domestic business, but there was already a charity realty in California. I went, son of a gun. There's somebody beat me to it, right? And their model, I believe, was 10% that they were donating. There's a gal in Texas called Give Realty, 25% across the board. She donates. Now, she donates to her specific charity. It's not her client's picked charity. There's no other real estate company in New Jersey that I know of that does this as a business model, but there are others that I've seen popped up. I saw a Charity Realty International pop up in Connecticut. No relation to me. I mean, I own the name in New Jersey, I guess, you know, that's how copywriter, you know.
Well, you know, it is really interesting to see how this works. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you find that there's a generational interest between older people and younger people's interest in finding this type of model to be something that they are not only interested in, but is starting to demand? And maybe I'll amplify that with, you know, there have been now surveys done in business schools throughout Europe that show that even though people want to do business in the generations coming up in their 20s, they find that the impact, whether it's the environmental impact, the health impacts, the corporate social responsibility, giving back, need to be part of the business models of companies as they begin, or be included in those companies if they're already operating. And it's one of their requirements to even be affiliated or be employed by those companies. And it's a new phenomenon that we're seeing in this new young 20-something business-minded generation. Are you finding an increase in that? And also, are you finding a gap or a dislocation, if you will, between that younger up-and-coming generation and perhaps, you know, those that are more senior, that are at the sort of the end of the professional career experience?
Right. Well, I think the older you are, the easier it is to be a philanthropist, just because you're generally, you know, your mortgage could be paid, or you're just in a better place in life. And I just looked up some statistics recently. I think 43% of giving is by the boomers. 26%, I believe, they called them the elders or the matures, people, I guess, pre-boomers. I'm a boomer. The millennials, unfortunately, are laggards. 11% of all giving is the millennial group, which I found really interesting, because I think of the millennial group as the group that you're talking about, that want to associate with social responsibility, at least the most vocal. I find them to be the most vocal, but they're the least giving. It's crazy, right?
No, it's
and the Gen Xers, the Gen Xers, 20% of all giving is by the Gen Xers. So the next generation really gets it.
So there's a gap. That's a very interesting perspective of a gap in the system, and that may be, of course, due to the economic cycles that we've gone through, where look at the millennials coming out of college.
Yeah, I was saying the same thing, right?
Right, and then they're just recovering, or they're finally getting jobs. Now we're coming to this new pandemic crisis, right, which has a significant economic impact.
Right.
Let's talk about that impact. Where do you see, because we have to speak about this with all topics because it's so impactful, the COVID-19 playing inside the model you have, or being part of that model? Do you see it increasing or decreasing?
Well, I think charities are being crushed right now because of disposable income is down. So in the short term, it's hurt. The crisis is hurting everybody. I recently saw 80, in the way I see who it's mostly impacting and what industries it's impacting. I think it was 86% of hospitality has reached out to their lenders for forbearance or for some kind of restructuring of their across the country. That's almost all of them, 86%. As opposed to, right when you first think who's impacted the most, retail, 23%. Only 23%, which is still a significant number, have reached out to their banks for a restructuring. In the world in which I operate in, industrial and office, we're at 3%. So, and my clients, on the landlord side, for now, have been being paid. The tenants are paying the rents.
Well, that poses a really interesting perspective. I mean, one of them may be the long-term bet on onshore manufacturing, which may be part of the reason why industrial may be saved from some of these other bricks and mortar industries. But let me ask you a question again, back to the topic of our conversation. So when we look at other models, where do you see improvement? And I'll give you a shout out of one example of where your model can be overlaid or maybe improved upon. Let's talk about opportunity zones. So opportunity zones is policy, but part of the reason that those zones exist is not just to give credits and create an engine or a mechanism for investors to lower their tax liabilities, but it's also spirit of it. The intent of the opportunity zones is to create, obviously, economic opportunity within the zones that are designated as such. Where and how do you see that model? Does it work? And the second question is, could it be improved upon using a modification to that structure by having something like this, like what you do through Charity Realty International?
Or is your question, could it be mandated within the policy itself?
Well, the policy would obviously need to be revised or amended, but could you see it improving the opportunity zone vehicles? Because if you look at the spirit of intent of why they were created so that where opportunity zones are located is to improve the economic development, to create jobs, to gentrify, and to assist those locales or those communities. So then in return, there's incentives given to the investors, as you know, in the form of lower tax rates. So my question is, could a model like Charity Realty International be overlaid or included in some policy like that, or policies that may be rolled out as we address what I call revitalization of Main Street due to the COVID-19 issues.
Right. I think I would love to see something like that happen. I am always a little skeptical when you mandate someone to give. I think it really has to come from you, not from a mandate. But would it help companies like mine? Of course it will. With respect to opportunity zones, what I've come to understand with them is it shines a light on certain areas that need help. But the projects have to make sense regardless. It has to be a good foundational economical project, because the tax benefit that my clients realize will never turn the ship if it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's almost like, for those that can remember, it reminds me of what they referred to in the United States as wrap mortgages from the 1988, 1987, 1986 era. And for our listeners, those sort of syndications did not work out very well because they were extremely over leveraged in how they valued those structures to begin with. And I think that's sort of the same.
Right. I don't like the word slippery slope. I think it's overused, but there you go. It was a lot of slipping going on in the mid-'80s. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And what we have to end on understanding, how do you see technology improving and assisting in the charity output of a model like Charity Realty International? Could you see or envision where technology, whether it's through AI or it's through community technology infrastructure that connects Main Street businesses that we're now going to have to assist and support at some level to keep them going, your local dry cleaners, your place that you may go and buy your bike from. Do you see technology helping and assisting someone like you in sort of, and your clients in terms of more precision-based opportunities that need assistance when it comes to then the charity side of the process?
Well, technology helps us get our word out, right? Without technology, people wouldn't even know we exist. Technology helps us work to higher efficiencies. We use it every day to target certain markets to see who's going to be expanding, who's going to be contracting, right? Who can use our services? What other technology advances specifically for this? Oh, I'll tell you the biggest one. There are 3 pretty good web-based charity watchdogs. I use Charity Navigator. I'm a member. I donate to them out of our own, just out of our own funds. And Charity Navigator, if our viewers have any interest in learning about a charity or digging down into a charity and see what they actually do, they will list. And if you become a member, you could actually look at the tax returns and see where this money goes. And they'll dig down and they'll give you the CEO and the top executive salaries. They'll give you the percentage that goes to programs and the percentage that goes to administration.
That is really, I think, a great way to end our segment, because the surveillance, and this goes back, I think, to the beginning, kind of loops into the beginning comments you made, that you can have all the passion and even your client to want to do good in a business model structure that provides corporate social responsibility through gift giving. But if you wind up with a bad seed or bad experience through that charity organization that you gave to, thinking that they were doing right by the money, having the tools that are easy and accessible to you as the gift giver, I think is an important part of the narrative as well. So surveillance is
it's important. You got to know who you're giving to. As a quick little anecdote, I wanted to pick a charity that touched me. And sometimes my clients say, I don't have a charity. So what's your charity? So I'm like, oh, so this is working out pretty good. So I researched who was the best provider for our veterans. And I found Homes for Our Troops. It's a Taunton, Massachusetts based charity. They're 9 cents on the dollar. Nobody's getting rich. But they take homes and adapt them for our most severely wounded warriors. They're not on television, right? So they can donate a high percentage. And they recently asked me to attend a key ceremony, and I got to bring my family. And we got to meet the disabled veterans that were in line to get houses like this, and the one that was being given the key to this home. We got to meet the contractors. We got to meet the president of the organization. And he went around and showed us, like, all the counters are lowered. The shower stalls have no lips, so you can wheel, you can wheel right in. I mean, the innovation and what went into that, and the wonderful feeling we got to actually go there and be able to meet the people that it was benefiting and hear from them directly on the good that this charity did, just warmed our heart. It gave me fuel for a year. I mean, that one visit gave me 12 months of fuel, but I located them through Charity Navigator. That's how I found them.
Well, that is a great observation, and I'm sure our listeners will check out that site. And it really also shows you from that last story that you provided that this is not just economics. It's also about the human impact it has. Even though both have a correlation to each other, helping human beings become respectful of themselves again.
Independent.
And being able to be productive members of society, I think is so tantamount, especially in today's situation. That is, I'm confident that we will grow out of this economic crisis due to the pandemic. That more and more people will need that extra uplifting and support from their community and from models that really support corporate social responsibility, like Charity Realty International and your model. And Jim, I want to thank you personally for what you do. I think it is a fantastic, altruistic way of looking at society, but also incorporating business into the society model of giving back. And you are an innovator in what you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It was a great opportunity for us to, get our word out, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And again, this is Professor Weiss speaking from New Jersey City University's Institute for Dispute Resolution and its Connecting Bridges and Borders podcast programming. And until our next topic discussion, until the next time, I bid adieu and take care and be safe.